Greetings and welcome to another edition of Montpelier Connection. This is State Representative Mikw Mrowicki from the Statehouse, and we're in the middle of the session. Today's guest is Senator Becca Balint.
Good morning.
Our new and wonderful addition to the Windham County delegation. How's it going for you here? First year?
Yeah, I'm having a great time, which is funny. People often stop me when I'm back home in the co-op or downtown, and they'll say, "How you doing? Are you still enjoying it?" And the truth is, it's what I always wanted to do.
Yeah.
It feels like a good fit for my personality. I really enjoy talking about difficult issues with people.
Yeah.
And so in general, I was telling someone this morning, I had rather modest goals for what I hope to get done in terms of learning the job, and I feel like I've met those goals.
Yeah.
And I'm very excited for the next session because I feel like I have so much more knowledge of how the system works and how I can be more effective. So, yeah.
Well, it certainly seems that way, and I think you may be experiencing what many of us do, that the ratio of challenge to reward is positive towards reward.
Yes, and I learned that early on in the session with taking the time to call people back, even when we get those big stacks of calls from the Sergeant of Arms office, and it's difficult to find the time, especially, so we're in morning committee all morning and then brief break for lunch and then in the afternoon. But I've learned that when I have a break in my committee time, I do make those calls, and even when someone disagrees with me, it's very rewarding to have that conversation, and people are so grateful for that contact.
And it really helps inform us if we hear different viewpoints.
Yeah, because we lose a lot of nuance up here in terms of all these issues are so complex that we're dealing with. You pull one thread and another thread gets pulled, and I really enjoy slowing down, trying to figure out where the nuance is and how you build a coalition around that.
You bet. And that we can't isolate one issue apart from all the rest. No matter how disparate it may seem on the surface, every vote is connected to every other vote, and those strands are connected.
Yeah, I had an interesting conversation. Last Monday, I was meeting with the healthcare team, the community healthcare team at the hospital, and I had a great conversation, really enjoyed hearing of the important work that they're doing. And someone in the group said, sometimes it feels like legislators are contradictory or hypocritical. And I pointed out to her that that's the human experience, that we are all complex in our ideas. And I've learned from being in the Senate, whenever I go into an argument on the floor or debate on the floor thinking I know how people are going to vote and why, I'm always surprised because we are complex and there are lots of motivations that we have. So
one of my favorite Whitman quotes is from Song of Myself, and he says, "Do I contradict myself? Very well, I contradict myself. I am large, I contain multitudes."
Yes, that's beautiful. Yes, that's how I feel. Exactly.
It's humanity.
It's humanity. And when you can see your colleagues in that way, and when you can see voters back home in that way, it really helps, I feel.
And one of the challenges, I think, is many of the most ardent followers of what's happening in the legislature usually follow one or two issues.
Yes.
And we do not have that luxury.
Right.
There are 25 different committees in this building, and all of us have to merge our work together.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've learned that right up close and personal, sitting on institutions, which is my afternoon committee, and looking at the Capitol bill. And everybody needs money for their projects. And it's always an interesting situation where I come into a committee meeting and I know that I'm on the losing end of an argument, and to try to find the reasons why they might not want to fund a particular program, and it's never simple.
Sure. There's some big concerns that we have this year. The budget has been one concern. Right. We seem to be getting a handle on that in a way that has its difficulties. There's an education bill that has been on a lot of people's minds. The House has passed something out. I did not vote for it. I did especially not like the caps or the mandates. But we need to keep working with it. I just introduced a bill in House Education Committee for expanded learning and summer learning opportunities, which I think are one of the one way we
Yeah.
can really help kids who need remedials and help kids who are already high learners and need extra enrichment. Have you seen the House bill?
I've seen the House bill. I've certainly had a lot of conversations with people back in Windham County. It was top of mind for lots of people at Brattleboro Town Meeting.
Yeah.
And I think a couple things I want to say. One is, this is the beginning of a very long and complicated conversation, and the House wanted to get something out that people could react to and turn over, and I know that the Senate is very keen to put out a very different bill.
Yeah.
They're going to borrow some parts of the House, but it's going to look really different. And so I say that to reassure people back home that there's a lot of very careful consideration going on in both bodies. And I think for me, as a former educator, as someone who has my kids in the public schools in Brattleboro, that we always have to be looking at outcome. And I think sometimes it gets lost in the money conversation, that we absolutely have to look at how are we serving the needs of the kids. And the first thing this morning, I got an email from an old colleague of mine. His wife was an old colleague of mine, and his wife worked with me at Floodbrook up in Londonderry, and then he ended up being the principal at Marlborough.
Oh, okay.
His name's Craig Hutt-Vader, and he sent me an email this morning. He's now the principal at the Mount Holly School,
Okay.
which I didn't know. I thought they had moved to Maine, and he sent me a very long email about his view of 361 and what some of the challenges are for him as a principal of a small school. And I'm really looking forward to hearing his input, because his school is a small school that is achieving really, really well. And we've got to be looking at those schools because they hold
a lot of the small schools are performing really well.
And not all, and that's not all, and we really need to hold that, because I think too the challenge in this building is there's a narrative that all small schools are doing an excellent job just because they're small.
Yeah.
And that's not the case. If you look at outcomes, certainly they fulfill a need for communities. Mm-hmm. But I really want to, I think there's 12 or 14 schools that the Department of Ed, Agency of Education, identified as being really meeting the challenges of poverty in a meaningful way. And I know in Brattleboro, it's absolutely critical that we get a handle on that.
You bet. I mean, I think it's clear when we look at outcomes that we've got pretty good outcomes until we start drilling down, and when you get to the free and reduced demographic, that's where our challenges are.
Yeah, and the other thing too that I was talking last night with Jane Kitchell about it, who's chair of appropriations, and she and I were talking about the other piece that we're not really focused on, and I wish we were, is the gender imbalance in our schools and the performance of girls versus boys. And it's big, and it is it's been a constant problem. And I don't feel like we have a good handle on that. And I would like to have a more honest conversation about that. Now, I'm looking forward to further conversations about that. Tristan Tolino and I have started a little bit of an ad hoc group on the side to get that cross conversation going between the House and Senate.
And what's the role of our schools? Is it just to produce workers?
Right.
Or is it to produce lifelong learners?
Right.
Who will...
Or engage citizens.
I mean, this is what Jefferson said.
Yes, absolutely.
The main role of our education is to further democracy. And, is money the only issue?
Right. I mean, absolutely not, right? That cannot be the only lens that you're looking through. And obviously, Vermonters care quite a bit about education, and they support strong educational funding, absolutely. And I don't think that's going to change. And I think the challenge is that people want to know not just that the money is being dispersed fairly, but that the money is being spent well at the local level. And if you have high need, high poverty areas, are we spending the money in the most efficacious way to help those students really achieve and be lifelong learners, engaged citizens, and employable if they want to stay here.
Critical thinkers.
Yes.
I mean,
absolutely. I could talk to you for an hour about that.
The essence, fostering creativity, critical thinking will prepare our kids for whatever job they want, for whatever role. Of course, then you go to specifics after you have the broad liberal arts background.
Right. Well, I was just reading this morning, there was a piece in the Washington Post about how we're forcing kids younger and younger towards achievement goals,
specialize,
as opposed to letting them be more creative in their expression. And
on the early end of it, people like Adele Diamond can show how the brain grows now, and that the way to foster executive functions that lead to the ability to do math, do better decisions, is they need free time. They need the arts. They need the social interactions. That's what grows the synapses in the
exactly.
early age.
And I know people have heard me say it for years that I have been troubled by the movement in our schools because of No Child Left Behind.
Yeah.
And it came from a good place. People really wanted accountability across the board, regardless of where you lived, regardless of socioeconomic status and race.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But what we heard in Brattleboro at a school board meeting probably a year and a half ago now, lots of parents came together and educators, and the common theme was we want more creative endeavors, more collaborative learning happening. And it's challenging for teachers whose schedules are very restricted right now, and I think a lot of parents don't realize the extent to which they're very prescribed in what they can do.
Which circles back to why I've introduced the bill about expanded learning opportunities, that in the after school, in the summertime, that's where these enrichment and sometimes remedials can really make a difference and support what happens during the regular school day.
Absolutely. I was thinking about that specifically in terms of financial literacy. I don't know if we talked about that a few weeks ago, that we have a strong need and there is not that time in the day in our schools because we've put other pressures on them, but they still need that information that they may not be getting from their families. So,
and that's part of the bill to create children's savings accounts.
Yes.
Is that this does foster financial literacy.
And Maine does that now?
There are several states that do that. We had somebody from Kansas come in to talk to us about how successful it's been.
Yeah, it is. These skills are learned early.
You bet.
Yeah. And when you've got two parents in most households, if you've got two parents, both working, stretched, things for nobody's intention to drop some of those threads that kids need to learn. But we put a lot of pressure on the schools to do it. So if we can pick it up at after school times or over the summer.
You bet. Yeah. Make the most of it.
And,
especially for those kids whose parents can't afford or don't either time or money to have those extras. This is where we can really make a difference. Another issue lots of people have been talking about since the start of the session is healthcare.
Right.
One of the things that I keep reminding people is that we have been moving forward on healthcare reform.
Right.
The blueprint for health
Yes.
has been in effect for several years now. It's working.
Yes.
You were sharing that you just met with the community health team in Brattleboro.
Phenomenal work that they're doing there. Really, I know perhaps it's overused, but they are some unsung heroes of the work that we're doing to make the medical community more adaptive and nimble. You've got people going out into the community teaching cooking skills, talking about diabetes and how to make real sustainable lifestyle changes. And I was so impressed with the work that they're doing. And a lot of people, I've been asking around, do you know what our community health teams are doing? And a lot of people don't. And so I love to take this opportunity to give a shout out to our group in Brattleboro. And I know that there are teams just like it all over the state who really are picking up these threads that are critical.
You bet. A lot of the emphasis has been on health insurance reform.
Yes.
And the focus on single payer, or what's the best way to do that.
Right.
But real health reform is ongoing, and it's happening, and it's working.
Yes, and it is really looking at patients holistically. What are all the factors that are impacting their ability to get healthy? So.
Another concern that has piqued the attention of many of us here and across the state is the economy. We're kind of piddling along. A lot of people are frustrated. They see Wall Street soaring to new heights every week, and average workers are not seeing that. There's been a lot of discussion how we can do things to help the average Vermonter. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I felt like the bill that we put out of Senate Economic Development Group was a good bill. That had a lot of different initiatives because there's no one answer, right? So we had a millennial enterprise zone tax credit. We had an angel investor tax credit to try to get high net worth individuals to invest more locally. We had first-time home buyer help. Unfortunately, all of these programs do take money to get up and running. And so there we definitely got pushback in finance, and I understand it. And I also really want us to think about long-term spending and not just the short-term, that we have got to grow jobs in Windham County. I actually got a message this morning from somebody on Facebook, a young man who's been looking for work in southern Vermont for months, and he's so discouraged. And another friend of mine moved here with her family. Her husband got a job in southern Vermont. They're moving back to the Midwest because she, as a trailing spouse, couldn't find work here. So it's really worrisome for me, and it's something I'm going to keep chipping away at, and it keeps me up at night. It really does.
And one of the things that I know from the House perspective, what we're aware of is government doesn't necessarily create jobs, but we create the conditions.
Right.
Starting with infrastructure and sport, and that's where I think Governor Shumlin has really done a good job. He's put more into our roads and bridges. Yeah, it's critical. The focus on our electronic infrastructure has been there. Those are the kind of supports that we need. Now we can circle back to schools, because one of the things individuals and companies look for before they come somewhere is what are the schools like? Absolutely. And it's one of the reasons I was really, really hoping to be on the Education Committee and Economic Development. And I know a lot of people back home have asked me why I'm not on that committee, but there's lots of things that go into figuring out that puzzle. But I really hope to continue that conversation between Economic Development and Education committees, because absolutely integral. If we don't have, as we talked about before, a well-trained workforce, but also creative, nimble, critical thinkers, because so much of the work in any business now is team focused. You really need to. Exactly. Yeah. A little earlier too, the supports for people to be in the workplace, especially for working parents. Yes. Vermont has a higher percentage of women in the workforce than any other state. Right. We need quality daycare. We need quality preschool. Right. And again, this is where I give credit to the governor that he's been a strong supporter right alongside the president. He does. He absolutely understands that critical time between 0 and 4 years is often the situation that makes or breaks a child's success in school. It is. And it's difficult to qualify and quantify long-term the savings, and I think sometimes we err in just looking at the short-term dollar figures, because we're talking about people who are equipped to go on to college or a 2-year degree or go to VTC and get employment locally, and that is the best thing that we can do for our children. Absolutely. I agree, and just going back to how important it is for parents to know their kids are being well cared for. It's an economic driver that adds millions to our economy. And talking about VTC, having that in CCV downtown now in Brattleboro, it's just thrilling. An amazing thing. It's a testament to the group that pulled that together, and again to the governor, because those colleges would not be there without him pushing on that. Yeah, every time I walk by that building now, I can't help but smile, because it is hope for our area. It is giving an absolute affirmative yes to the importance of education being an integral part of our downtown, and I find it thrilling. Can't imagine what the downtown would look like if it were still boarded up. No, nor can I. That was a hard time. That was a hard time for Brattleboro. And good times ahead. Yes, I do feel that. I feel like there is an energy. I want to just talk briefly. I was at the BDCC annual meeting on Monday, and Shap Smith came down to talk, and I was so encouraged by the level of communication going on between Bellows Falls and Brattleboro, because our fates are intertwined. They're absolutely linked, and had a great talk. Speaking of the Masabi group, I had a great talk with Craig Miskovich at the end. He was talking about, we have incredibly reliable water and sewer in Brattleboro and Bellows Falls. And that is going to help us long-term in thinking about economic development. And
I do. I feel like there are better days ahead.
Yeah.
I absolutely do.
Yeah, and glad that you're part of that here.
Thank you.
Yeah, been a pleasure to work with you, get to know you, and the most welcome new member of our delegation. We have some good ones too, but I think a lot of us felt like we really needed something different in the Senate, and you certainly provided that. So
I appreciate that, Mike. Thank you.
And again, thanks to all the people back at BCTV for helping make this possible, for bringing our work back home to you. And until next time, this is Mikw Mrowicki.
And Becca Balint.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.